Ben Hogan was an extremely successful golfer, but one of the things that made Ben Hogan successful was he was very meticulous, and he was one of those guys that used analytics, even though they wasn't called that in those days. But here's a quote, or a couple of quotes, that I find very intriguing. Ben said, "Golf is a game of misses." A game of misses. He also went on to say, "You must leave your misses in the best possible positions." Okay? It's a game of misses. Leave your misses in the best possible positions. Okay? And he ended up using an analogy which made it a little easier for me to understand. But he said, if you had a shotgun array, like you shot a shotgun and you had all the BBs in an array, he said, you intended for that BB to be that center shot. That's where you were shooting. He said, but all those other BBs are possibilities, are misses. So, because I think there's a lot of people out there, like myself, that are always unsure exactly how to aim, when we're setting up to hit a ball. It's not always exactly where you're aiming where that ball ends up. And sometimes that mistake or that miss ends up being a great shot. And sometimes that's the difference. And let me kind of give an example. Again, if I went out and hit a bunch of shots, let's say I shot 100 shots, I'm going to have a certain number of them right down the middle. I'm going to have a certain number of them as much as, say, 15 yards to the left and 15 yards to the right. So if I'm hitting, say, 130 to 150 yards out, I have to realize that there's a possibility that I could hit it in 15 yards either way of where I'm aiming. So I've got about a 30-yard area there of tolerance, or kind of if you bring it back to where you're hitting, it kind of creates a cone for you. So you got this cone of possibilities, let's call it. But to be honest with you, that's where the ball could possibly end up. Now, how does this pertain to what you're doing out on the golf course? Well, let's say you're 120 yards out of the green, and the pin just happens to be on the right side of the green. So, what do? Do you aim right at the pin? Okay, well, okay. But what Ben Hogan is saying is that your cone of possibilities may be that if you would aim in the middle of the green, that, you might hit it the middle of the green. You're 15 yards to the left, might be on the far edge of the green, but your far right one may be right near the hole. However, if you shift that cone to the right and use that pin as the center, then your 15 yards to the left, you're going to be okay. But your 15 yards to the right, you might be in the water or some other hazard, and it completely destroy your round. So you have to really take a lot of those kind of things into consideration. But that's a good general rule of thumb, so that when you're looking out there and you're trying to determine where you're trying to hit the ball, realize that your aim should be in between almost the areas where you're trying to go, because you may go a little more left, you may go a little more right than you anticipate, okay? And really, golf is a game of trying to improve your possibilities, okay? I mean, you're going to make mistakes. Golf is inherent, but you want to minimize the mistake itself.